Close your eyes and picture this. A bustling medieval village, not with grand castles or shining armor, but with women tirelessly working the fields. These unsung heroes were the backbone of their communities, yet their stories have been forgotten. Today we uncover the untold tale of women in medieval agriculture, a story of resilience, innovation, and survival. While we often hear about kings, knights, and battles, the real heroes were the ordinary people, especially women, who worked day and night to keep their families and communities alive. The medieval period, roughly spanning from the 5th to the 15th century, was a time of great hardship and survival. Agriculture was the lifeblood of society. Without it, there would be no food, no trade, and no way to sustain growing populations. In medieval Europe, over 90% of the population lived in rural areas, and farming was the primary occupation. Women were not just passive bystanders, they were active, essential contributors. From planting crops to raising livestock, from preserving food to brewing ale, women's labor was the glue that held medieval society together. In this video, we'll explore how women played a crucial role in 3 key areas: farming, animal husbandry, and food production. We'll see how their work was not just about survival, but also about innovation and community building. And we'll ask the question, why have their contributions been so overlooked in history? By the end of this video, you'll have a new appreciation for the women who shaped the medieval world, and perhaps a new perspective on history itself. The backbone of the medieval household, meet Agnes, a 12th century peasant woman whose day began before sunrise. While her husband tilled the fields, Agnes managed the household, ensuring her family's survival through harsh winters. Her story is one of resilience and innovation, a testament to the strength of medieval women. While the village is still quiet, Agnes is already at work. She steps into the cool morning air, carrying a wooden pail to milk the cows. The chickens cluck softly as she scatters grain for them, and the smell of fresh bread wafts from the hearth where she's already started breakfast for her family. Agnes's husband is out in the fields, plowing the land with their oxen. But Agnes's work is no less important. She's the one managing the household, ensuring there's food on the table, clothes on their backs, and enough supplies to last through the harsh winter months. Her hands are calloused from years of labor, but her mind is sharp, always planning, always preparing, managing household resources. Agnes was the heart of her household, managing every aspect with meticulous care. From overseeing food storage to mending clothes, her responsibilities were vast and vital. She kept a watchful eye on the grain reserves, knowing precisely when to start preserving food for the harsh winter ahead. Her careful planning ensured that her family had enough supplies to endure the long, cold months. Without her foresight and diligence, her family's survival would be at stake. Agnes's role wasn't just about managing resources, it was about creating a sustainable environment where her family could thrive, even in the toughest conditions. Kitchen gardens. Behind her small cottage, Agnes tended to a kitchen garden that was far more than a hobby, it was a lifeline for her family. She cultivated a variety of vegetables like onions, leeks, and cabbages, which provided essential nutrients. Herbs such as parsley and sage added flavor to meals, while chamomile and mint served medicinal purposes. Agnes's garden was a treasure trove of resources, each plant serving a unique and crucial role. Her knowledge of plants was not merely practical, it was a legacy passed down through generations, ensuring that her family had access to both nourishment and natural remedies. This garden was a testament to her resourcefulness and the deep connection medieval women had with the land, providing sustenance and healing in a world full of uncertainties. Food preservation. One of Agnes's most important skills was food preservation. In a time without refrigerators, she had to be creative. She dried fruits and vegetables in the sun, salted meat to keep it from spoiling, and fermented cabbage to make sauerkraut. These techniques ensured her family had food even when the fields were bare. Her work wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving in a world full of uncertainty. But Agnes's role didn't stop at the garden gate. She wasn't just a homemaker, she was a farmer too. When the harvest season came, Agnes was out in the fields, working alongside her husband and neighbors. Her hands, already skilled at gardening and food preservation, were just as capable of wielding a sickle or gathering sheaves of wheat. The fields were where the community came together, and Agnes was at the heart of it all. Women in the fields. Farming and harvesting. Imagine the golden fields of medieval England during harvest season. Among the swaying wheat, you'll find women like Agnes, their hands calloused from hours of labor. These women weren't just farmers. They were the lifeline of their communities, working tirelessly to feed their families and neighbors. The sun is high in the sky, and the fields are golden with ripe wheat. Agnes is bent over, sickle in hand, cutting stalks one by one. Her hands are rough and calloused, her back aches from hours of labor, but she doesn't stop. She knows the survival of her family depends on this harvest. Around her, other women are working just as hard, their laughter and chatter filling the air. This isn't just work, it's a community effort, a shared struggle to ensure everyone has enough to eat, planting, weeding, and harvesting. For Agnes, caring for livestock was more than a chore. It was a way of life. From milking cows to shearing sheep, her bond with the animals was crucial to her family's survival. Discover how women like Agnes shaped medieval agriculture through their role in animal husbandry. In the spring, she helped plant seeds, carefully spacing them out to ensure a good yield. During the summer, she spent hours weeding, pulling out unwanted plants that could choke the crops. And when autumn came, she was out there again, harvesting wheat, barley, and oats. This wasn't just men's work. Women like Agnes were just as vital to the farming process, working in teams. Farming was far from a solitary task. It was a collective effort that brought communities together, especially during the demanding harvest season. Women played a pivotal role in this process, often working in teams to tackle the immense workload. They formed strong bonds with their neighbors, sharing not just the physical labor but also stories, songs, and laughter that lightened the burden of their tasks. This sense of community was more than just companionship. It was a lifeline in an era where life was challenging and resources were limited. Women supported each other in countless ways, from lending a helping hand in the fields to sharing precious knowledge about farming techniques and household management. Their collaborative spirit extended beyond the fields, encompassing every aspect of life. Whether it was helping a neighbor mend clothes, sharing seeds for the next planting season, or taking turns watching each other's children, these acts of mutual support were essential for survival. The camaraderie and shared purpose fostered a resilient community where everyone's contributions were valued and necessary. This collective effort not only ensured the success of the harvest, but also strengthened the social fabric, creating a network of support that was crucial in navigating the hardships of medieval life. Wild plants and herbal knowledge. Agnes's knowledge didn't stop at cultivated crops. She knew how to identify wild plants that could be used for food and medicine. Nettles could be boiled into a nutritious soup, while dandelion leaves made a healing salve. This knowledge was passed down from mother to daughter, a precious inheritance that helped families survive in times of scarcity. Women like Agnes were the unsung botanists of their time, using their skills to feed and heal their communities. While the fields were vital, Agnes's expertise extended to another critical area, animal husbandry. She wasn't just a farmer, she was also a caretaker of livestock. From milking cows to shearing sheep, Agnes's work with animals was just as important as her work in the fields. Let's explore how women like her shaped medieval agriculture through their role in animal husbandry. Animal husbandry. Women as caretakers of livestock. Agnes had a special bond with the animals on her farm. She knew each cow by name: Bessie, the gentle one; Daisy, the stubborn one. She could tell when a sheep was feeling unwell just by the way it moved, and she was the one who nursed the lambs back to health when they were sick. The chickens clucked around her feet as she scattered grain, and she always made sure they laid enough eggs to feed her family. For Agnes, the animals weren't just livestock, they were part of her daily life, her responsibility, and in many ways her companions. Milking, shearing, and tending to livestock. Every morning, Agnes would milk the cows, her hands moving in a steady rhythm as the pail filled with fresh, frothy milk. Shearing the sheep was hard work, but Agnes knew it had to be done. The wool would be spun into yarn and woven into clothes for her family. She also tended to the pigs, feeding them scraps and ensuring they were healthy enough to provide meat for the winter. Women like Agnes were the backbone of animal husbandry, performing tasks that required both skill and patience. Producing dairy products. Agnes didn't just stop at milking the cows, she turned that milk into butter and cheese, staples of the medieval diet. Using a churn, she would agitate the cream until it thickened into butter. For cheese, she would curdle the milk, press the curds, and age the wheels in a cool, dark corner of her cottage. These dairy products weren't just for her family, they were often traded or sold in local markets, providing an essential source of income. Trading surplus animal products. Agnes's work with animals didn't just feed her family, it also connected her to the wider community. Surplus eggs, butter, and wool were often traded at local markets. These markets were bustling hubs of activity, where women like Agnes bartered for goods they couldn't produce themselves, like salt or iron tools. This trade wasn't just about survival, it was about building relationships and strengthening the community. But Agnes's contributions didn't end there. She wasn't just a farmer or a caretaker of animals, she was also a master of food production. From grinding grain into flour to brewing ale, Agnes transformed raw ingredients into meals that sustained her family and community. Let's dive into the world of medieval food production and see how women like Agnes kept their families fed and thriving. Food production, from field to table. After toiling in the fields, Agnes returned home to transform raw ingredients into nourishing meals. Her kitchen was a hub of activity, where the aroma of fresh bread and simmering stews filled the air. Join us as we explore the world of medieval food production and the women who made it possible. But her work was far from over. Her kitchen was a hub of activity, filled with the smells of fresh bread and simmering stews. She would grind grain into flour using a hand mill, the rhythmic sound filling the small cottage. Then she would knead the dough, her hands moving with practiced ease before baking it in the hearth. The smell of warm bread would soon fill the air, a comforting reward for a hard day's work. Primary cooks and food processors. Agnes was the heart of her kitchen, and like most medieval women, she was the primary cook and food processor. Every meal started with her, whether it was grinding grain, chopping vegetables, or stirring a pot over the fire. She knew how to stretch ingredients to feed her family, turning simple crops into hearty meals. Her kitchen wasn't just a place to cook. It was a place of creativity and resourcefulness. Brewing ale and baking bread. Bread and ale were the staples of the medieval diet, and Agnes was an expert at making both. She brewed ale using barley, letting it ferment in large wooden barrels. This wasn't just a drink, it was a source of nutrition and a safer alternative to water, which could often be contaminated. As for bread, Agnes baked it daily, using flour she ground herself. The smell of fresh bread was a constant in her home, a symbol of her hard work and care, passing down recipes and techniques. Agnes's knowledge of food production wasn't just learned, it was inherited. Her mother had taught her how to bake bread, brew ale, and preserve food, just as her grandmother had done before her. These recipes and techniques were passed down through generations, a living legacy of women's wisdom. Agnes in turn taught her daughters, ensuring that this knowledge would survive for years to come. Agnes's story is just one example of the countless women who shaped medieval agriculture. From the fields to the kitchen, their contributions were essential to the survival of their families and communities. But why have their stories been forgotten? Why do we rarely hear about the women who fed entire villages, brewed the ale, and baked the bread? Let's explore the legacy of these women and why their work deserves to be remembered. The legacy of medieval women in agriculture. History books often overlook the contributions of women like Agnes, yet their labor was the backbone of medieval society. Without them, communities would have crumbled. Let's honor their legacy and understand the true impact of these remarkable women on medieval agriculture. Their work was seen as ordinary, something that was expected but not celebrated. But in reality, their labor was extraordinary. Without them, medieval society would have crumbled. They were the ones who planted the seeds, tended the animals, baked the bread, and brewed the ale. They were the invisible force that kept families and communities alive. Yet their stories have been largely forgotten, erased from the pages of history. Essential to survival. Women's labor wasn't just important, it was essential. In a world where survival depended on every hand contributing, women worked alongside men to ensure there was enough food, clothing, and resources to go around. They were the backbone of medieval agriculture, and without them, the system would have collapsed. Foundation for modern agriculture. The knowledge and skills of medieval women laid the foundation for modern agriculture. Their techniques for planting, harvesting, and preserving food are still used today in some form. They were the original innovators, finding ways to make the most of limited resources and passing down their wisdom through generations. Understanding history. Fully, Recognizing the contributions of women like Agnes helps us understand history more fully. It reminds us that history isn't just about kings, battles, and grand events. It's also about the everyday people who kept the world running. By telling their stories, we honor their legacy and gain a deeper appreciation for the past. The story of medieval women in agriculture is a story of resilience, ingenuity, and quiet strength. It's a story that deserves to be told not just as a footnote in history, but as a central part of our understanding of the past. As we wrap up, let's reflect on how we can ensure these women are remembered and celebrated for generations to come. From the fields to the kitchen, women were the unsung heroes of medieval agriculture. They planted the seeds, tended the animals, baked the bread, and brewed the ale. Their resilience, ingenuity, and hard work kept families and communities alive through some of the toughest times in history. They may not have worn crowns or wielded swords, but their contributions were just as vital, if not more so. Let's remember and honor their legacy, not as footnotes in history, but as the central figures they truly were. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new about the incredible women of medieval agriculture, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about history's hidden figures. Let's give these women the recognition they deserve. And tell me in the comments, what other untold stories would you like to hear about? Is there a forgotten hero or an overlooked chapter of history you'd like me to explore? Let's keep the conversation going.